Hello, fellow writers. I am Lewis, and that is Tolkien over there, and this is the Scripturient Society.
Whenever you say I'm
Hello.
Lewis and this is Tolkien, I want to say this I'm Lewis and that's Clark. Like that's what I think of is Lewis and Clark.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. But no,
that's
it's Lewis and
understandable.
Tolkien, like the writers. At some point we'll have to talk
Maybe
in
we
depth
should say
about their
Tolkien and
rivalry.
Lewis.
Tolkien and Lewis. Yeah.
I
See, you froze. Oh, now you're back.
Yay, you were too.
Good.
Okay.
Yay.
I said nothing else really goes with Tolkien, so it's hard to butcher that one or find another name to go with it.
Tolkien.
So,
It's true.
yeah.
If you guys listeners are like, wow, why does the audio sound weird this episode? For some reason my internet connection says unstable. So we're doing our best to keep the audio flowing, and I will try and patch it all together to sound like we aren't having internet problems.
Normal.
But yeah.
I have had Audacity problems. For those of you that know anything about sound, that's like the program we use. I've had problems every single episode, and finally it was working today, and then the internet went out.
The internet went out. Yep, that's about right.
So
that's how it works.
Eventually we will have this down.
Yes. Eggs. Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. Hi, love.
A person.
We're
I hope.
recording. It's my husband.
Yep.
Your food's in the microwave. What? You
Don't bother
it?
me.
It's still hot. I just made it. You ate, didn't you?
Like 2 hours ago.
Okay, then go eat it.
Well, like an hour and a half ago.
Then
Stuff
go eat
yourself.
it. What?
Yeah, I'll eat a little bit.
Okay.
I didn't know you were making dinner, honestly.
I texted you.
When?
At some point today in one of my texts, I told you if you came home, I was going to make dinner.
You know how many texts I get day right now?
I don't remember in which text I said it.
Okay. I'm definitely going to eat it.
Tell Avi I say hi.
Karissa says hi.
Hi, Karissa.
I'll edit that out.
Okay.
Anyways, how's your week been?
My week has been normal with nothing exciting. So, story of my life. What about you?
Interesting. God, today's only Tuesday, isn't it?
Yep.
It feels like another Friday. I feel like I've been living a succession of Fridays since last Monday. So every day I think the weekend's coming, but then the weekend never shows up. So
And it never comes.
And then it never comes. It's different than like when every day is like a Monday. That's a different kind of pain. The Friday pain is like you feel like you've already been through a whole week of struggle, and then you're like, where's my relief? And then it doesn't show up. And that's how I've been doing this week. I guess this and last week. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, I think that's it. I am I'm to skip ahead to our book recommendations. I'm currently reading The Firekeeper's Daughter.
Ooh,
it is so good.
Have I heard of that? Who's that by?
Probably. I want to say it's Angela Booley or something that sounds like that. I'll look it up. But it's really, really good. We're doing it for that pretentious book club, but Yennefer's crying. I'm not sure why. Yennefer, go hang out with Dad. Go hang out with Dad. He's lonely. He's lonely. Go hang out with him. She's like, why are you in the closet? Come hang out with everyone. Angeline Booley.
Okay. That sounds familiar. So I've probably seen it around.
Yeah, the cover is beautiful. So I'm sure you'd recognize the cover. And it's super good. Highly recommend to everybody. It wasn't what I expected. It looks like it would be like a YA fantasy. It's not. It's like a YA mystery, like thriller, suspense, crime. Like it's weird. It's its own genre, and I'm a fan.
Cool.
Anyways.
Well, for my reading or book recommendations this week, I already told Ash this, but I read Fable by Adrienne Young and Namesake. It's a duology, and they are also books. I thought they were going to be more YA fantasy, but it's hard to describe. It's like a fantasy world, but with very little magic. So it's a completely made up world, but magic isn't really a factor.
Oh, I love this.
And it's so nautical. And I've learned recently that I really like books that take place on ships, whether that be nautical, like seafaring ships, or spaceships.
Yep. Oh my God, same. We are so on the same page about that.
Yes. I think it's like
100% agree.
Yeah, something about the found family aspect of like there are only these few people around and they all have their skill set. It's just
and you're
really
in a
cool.
confined space, but you're going somewhere exciting. Yeah.
And you hopefully get along with the people with you, or you have rivalries. And
exactly.
it's so good.
Exactly. That stuff, those books have been on my TBR forever. Maybe if I add them to the TBR for that pretentious book club, I'll actually get around to reading them.
It's true, you should. And for those of you who know what Ash looks like and knows the covers, the covers go together to make a face, and it looks like Ash.
Oh, you think it looks like me? I'm so happy. I think she's the girl on the cover is beautiful. She's a natural redhead, or she's supposed to look like a natural redhead, and she's got freckles and very blue eyes. And I'm like, yes, in my dreams, I look like that. So I'm glad there's a similarity.
In my eyes, you do look like that. So
whenever I feel bad about myself, I can just think in Karissa's eyes, you know what? I look like the girl on the cover of Fable.
Exactly.
That model is out there somewhere like, someone talking about me.
Right. She's like, oh, really? No.
Yeah. My long lost twin.
Yeah. I also noticed, you know how you notice details in book covers later?
Yes.
In her eyes, there is a ship on the first one.
Oh, that is so cool.
And it's like, I think it's shattered glass in the second one.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's very cool.
In for the cover, on the cover of My Lovely Wife, I didn't notice it until Kendall pointed it out, but you can see the husband standing in the reflection of the knife on the cover, and I never would have seen it. It's so cool. I love that kind of hidden stuff. It's so smart.
Book cover designers are pretty on top of things these days.
They're very on top of things. It's very true. Well, what's our word of the week?
Our word of the week is, I don't think there's a way to butcher this word, Gimcrack.
Gimcrack.
Gimcrack,
What does it mean?
And it means flimsy or poorly made, but deceptively attractive.
Huh. Interesting.
So like little knickknacks could be gimcracks.
Or interesting. So it's like a noun or an adjective?
I think it's both, but I think it's specifically an adjective. So it's like a gimcrack book, which would be something that looks pretty but falls apart when you try to use it.
Yeah. Interesting. Gimcrack. I like that. I'm definitely going to find a way to use that.
Right? I really just want to make these words popular. We're going to bring them out of obscurity. That's my goal.
That's exactly what help us out, listeners. Use these words this week. That's the goal, is to try to find whatever the word of the week is, try to find a way to work it into your natural dialogue the next week.
Exactly. Whether it's your dialogue or even your writing, either one.
Exactly. Well, we've already done our word of the week and our book recommendations, so I guess we can jump into the theme of the week.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
So this week we're talking about romantic subplots.
Ooh la la.
And I feel like if we have any male listeners, you guys all just tuned out. Don't. Because
don't.
You still need to know about it.
You seriously need to know about it.
We're going to teach you how to do it well, and also when not to do it.
Yeah. Did you guys know that you don't have to have a romantic subplot? I think that might be the biggest takeaway, is that not every book has to have a romantic subplot.
It's so true. I will say too, I do have a coupler. I have a couple of spoiler-ish warnings.
New words.
Good. So I just want to, I might spoil, like, again, romantic subplots for Burning by Danielle Rollins, Jane Unlimited by Kristen Kishore, Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. So if you haven't read those and you don't want to know anything about them, maybe come back to this later. So I don't know, do you have any spoiler warnings?
I don't think I have any spoiler warnings. Mine are going to be very spur of the moment. I'll try and throw a spoiler warning out there, but we'll see. I'm not as prepared as Karissa. I'm never as prepared as Karissa.
I think this episode idea was my idea.
It was your idea.
Okay. So I'm looking at my bookshelves. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write down all the books that I think this is, where I feel like the subplots could have been better. And I'm looking at my shelves and I can't think of anything. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, should I make up this problem?
Yeah.
But no, I eventually thought about it and said, oh, okay, there are definitely some that I would want to talk about. So.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a thing that I've definitely thought about, but I didn't have specific examples. I've definitely thought about it. I don't think I've ever had a full discussion about it, so I'm interested to see what crops up in this episode today.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to just jump in, or do you want to jump in, or what?
Well, should we define what a romantic subplot is first, so people know what we're talking about?
Sure, you do it.
Oh, okay. Well, every book has got the main plot, like the big beginning, middle, end, what happens, the most important stuff in the book. But then a well-rounded book should have a couple different subplots, and the amount of subplots can vary based on, everyone has very different opinions about how many subplots you should have. But most books have a romantic subplot, and that's the subplot that takes place specifically between the main character and their love interest. The thing about the romantic subplot is that it is ever present, and sometimes it has no relevance to the main plot. And I think with any kind of subplot, the biggest thing to keep in mind is that if it does not in some way relevant to your main plot, you don't need it. Like it either needs to be kind of an echo of your plot in a different way because you're trying to reveal something different, or it needs to play heavily into the plot or affect the big plot in some way. But I think romantic subplots particularly tend to be kind of weak in that aspect because they literally only exist in a lot of books because people expect them to exist.
Yes, and I think they have a tendency to take over. And unless you're writing a romance book, which if you're writing a romance book, then that's fine. It should be the dominant factor. But if it's not, you really have to be careful not to let it go too out of hand.
True. Yeah. Also, I think whatever level you start with your romantic subplot, it needs to stay that level of importance. If it starts out and it's not very important to the plot, it should remain unimportant and kind of in the background the whole time. It shouldn't increase with importance to the point where it's just as important as your primary plot. It needs to be the same level. If it's very important to begin with, that's fine. It just needs to stay very important the whole time, consistently. I
do think too, and not to get too much into this because I think we're going to do a separate episode about love triangles, but I think this is one of the major problems with love triangles is that they eventually become the dominant
the entire
focus.
Plot. I think that is the biggest risk of romantic subplots is that they become the whole plot. And then you're like, well, this is not the book I signed up for.
Yep.
And I actually don't think those plots do super well. Like I don't like the books that have the subplots that take over. Like some people will like them, but I think when you look at the really successful books out there, the really successful ones don't do that because it's not as well crafted as a story that has the consistency between the plot and the subplot.
It's something you put up with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing with romantic subplots is I think when they take over, this other weird thing happens at the same time, which is that like some especially with female characters, not as much with dude characters, but with female characters especially, all of a sudden all of their goals, desires, and personalities shift to be only in line with everything relevant to the romantic subplot and to their love interest. And it's like we don't hear anymore about like their thoughts, their feelings, their goals from before. Like either they'll have a whole personality shift. It's just angst. It's either a personality shift to be compatible or interesting with the love interest, or they've totally forgotten about all their starting goals that had nothing to do with the love interest. So that's like probably so far. I was gonna say the most frustrating thing about romantic subplots, but I think I already said that. Right. It is a frustrating thing.
Yeah. And I think on the flip side of that, people try to combat that, and it is usually female authors because your love life shouldn't be the only factor in your life for anyone. But I think sometimes they almost overdo making that point where then they want this love interest, but the character is weirdly opposed to it for no reason or purposely pushes them away for reasons that don't make sense. Because as though their other goals can't be compatible with a love interest, and they can usually.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
If it's not, then you got to let it go. Why even have the love interest in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. Or if it's not compatible in a way the character can see, like those need to be the things that she takes issue with, not like random, weird reasons that she, like saying like, oh, he doesn't like me when like he's been, teasing or harassing her the whole book. And we all know that typically means the guy is interested in you. Like, don't make your main character dumb about love. Like she shouldn't be love dumb. Can she be a little oblivious? Sure. A little bit. Can she be bad at relationships? 100%. Can she be really bad at flirting? 100%. But like she shouldn't be stupid when it comes to like a romantic relationship.
Yeah. And those traits should be evident in her other personality traits. She can't be only oblivious to romantic things. She should be oblivious to other things as well.
Yeah. If she's an intuitive character, it doesn't make any sense that she wouldn't sense that a guy's interested in her. So she could have, maybe she has a lot of anxiety about it for, XYZ reasons. You could do that. I personally love a romantic subplot. In fact, most of the books I read have them. They're like most of the books that I love have them. So this is in no way like bashing the romantic subplot. It's just saying do the romantic subplot well, and like everything else, don't sacrifice your bigger story just to throw in a romantic subplot.
I think to kind of build off of, I think it was the last episode that you said, where, you know, you can have a theme and a purpose for a message you want to write, but it can't take over and interrupt the plot. I think in a certain sense, romantic subplots are the opposite, in that people include them with nothing to say about it.
Yeah.
And you should have something to say with the romantic subplot.
Yeah.
It can't just be there because you think people want it. You have to have something to say about relationships or about the character.
Exactly.
Or something.
Exactly. And if you're a truly masterful writer, it should play into your overall message or theme of the book too. Like you really want everything to be in line with everything else in the book. So the subplot should support the primary plot, and the message of the subplot should support the message of the primary plot. Like they should all tie together. If you just got one little lonely island romantic subplot over here that's got nothing really to say about the overall message, that doesn't really affect the overall plot, like you could remove it and the overall plot would stay the same, right? Then you either need to drop the subplot or you need to do a lot of reworking to make it fit. But I think in that situation, it's easier to just drop the subplot. Yeah.
I would agree. I tend to like books with romantic subplots. It just adds, I think what it is, it makes it more well-rounded, and it gives you a lot of aspects. If you already have action and mystery or whatever, then the thing you're missing is maybe the relationship aspect. And so I think it tends to make books well-rounded, but
it does. Yeah. And it's a part of a lot of people's lives. So I think that's why sometimes when we read books that don't have romantic subplots, it can feel like something's missing, because to most of us, even if we're not in a relationship, you know, like you think about being in a relationship, or you think about that cute guy you saw at the coffee shop. And so I think that's where, even if you decide that your book doesn't need a romantic subplot, or your romantic subplot doesn't fit, I think it's important to still incorporate some kind of interest in whoever that character is interested in, you know, like it doesn't need to be like any actual plot, but it could be literally noticing the cute guy at the grocery store or something, you know, like you don't want your character to not express that they have an interest in, you know, a romantic relationship, because that's where I think when that happens is when it feels like something's missing, and it feels like it's not well-rounded. Yeah, it's like you're just avoiding it. So then you're like, well, I just read this whole book and it was really great, except that like this big part of this character's life I don't have any little window into. So yeah,
total mystery. So I was gonna talk, which one should I talk about first? I guess I'll talk about Strange the Dreamer first, because I really love this book. And it's not heavy spoilers, but there is a romantic subplot in it, and I don't think it needed it. Yeah, I know that might be a controversial thing to say for people that really love those books, but I just don't know that it added anything, because, and this is also an issue, I didn't really feel a lot of chemistry between the two characters.
So hard.
And so it's like, how am I supposed to get on board with this? I love them as individuals. I would love them to be friends, but I'm just not feeling this.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what Strange the Dreamer did, even though I otherwise really love those books.
Yeah.
And I would say that this is also what happened in Scythe by Neil Shusterman, is that the two main characters, great on their own, great as friends, but then this romantic subplot came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I'm just not buying it the whole time. It gets to a point where you have to accept it and you're like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel natural when it cropped up. And I think that can be a problem.
Yeah. I think a solution to that can be like, you don't need a romantic subplot to express the idea of your characters being romantic. Like if these characters are friends and they're interesting on their own and you like them as friends, and maybe one of them is interested in the other one, you can drop hints about that without developing a full subplot. Like not every like romantic attachment actually needs a subplot to go with it. Like if there's not enough tangible stuff there to make an interesting romantic subplot, you don't need to develop one at all. You can just have did his gaze just linger on me for a moment longer than it needed to? Did she just give me a second look? Or like, you know, like you can just tiny little moments and or just even implications of those moments here and there throughout the book is enough to kind of satiate the romantic in all of us that wants to see a romantic subplot without putting in the effort to make a half-assed romantic subplot.
Mm-hmm. Also, I bet it's a good fodder for fan fiction.
Oh,
the more subtle you are.
Excellent fodder. I think middle grade fiction does really well with that because
yes, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, because romantic subplots really aren't a part of middle grade fiction. I don't think they should be a part of middle grade fiction, but that doesn't mean there aren't those little implications that maybe this character has a crush on that character. Like the early Percy Jackson books, I swear I'm going to reference them in every single episode. But like with Annabeth and Percy, right? There's no I have a crush on him. She has a crush on me. We're going to go make out. I don't even think that we see them kiss until like the last book or something like that. Like it's, and they're not even officially dating until like the last book in the series. So like you can get there if you're taking a middle grade into YA, but other than that, like you don't need it. But I think that the technique that authors apply to expressing romantic interest between characters in middle grade, I think you can take that and put that in a lot of books that don't need a romantic subplot. And it will have a similar effect and people will be intrigued. Yeah. And it's totally fan fiction. Like people are totally going to write fan fiction about it if they like it.
And I feel like that's not that fan fiction is the gauge for how good your story is, but if people go their own direction with it and really get into it, I think that's a good sign.
Oh, I think it's a great sign. It means that they connected with something about the book or the characters, or they wanted to see more of something. And yeah, I mean, I think dropping little romantic hints is better than a poorly done romantic subplot. And it also ensures that your character's priorities stay the same the whole time because they're not distracted with this subplot that has nothing to do with their overall goal.
Yeah, so on kind of the lines of Scythe and Strange the Dreamer particularly, is that I think part of the reason authors feel they have to add the romantic subplot is because they feel they have to give a reason for those characters to be on the same side.
Yep.
It, like an enemies to lovers type of thing.
Yeah.
It can't be like, oh, they're good people or they're friends. It has to be there's a romantic interest and that explains their motivation to meet halfway. And I don't think that's always necessary. You can care about people in a friend way and still be motivated to the same types of things, to sacrifice for them, to take their side, like all that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
I think a lot of times it's turned into romantic when it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that thing about making a well-rounded world and well-rounded characters and well-rounded background and side characters. Like look at our friend group from college. We had all of our dude friends lived like a few floors down, and then we lived upstairs, but it was like a good mix of girls and dudes, and we were all friends. And while there were some crushes here and there, because that's inevitable, that was never the focal point, I really feel like, of any of our college times or adventures. And like it, like not every crush was like completely relevant to my life, like I knew about it, it was there, just like maybe your characters in the book can see that this character over here might be flirting with that character, and it's fun to see because it feels real and authentic, but it's not important enough to be a subplot because it's not directly relevant to the main character. So that's, I think, a way you can definitely keep romance in your world without putting in a totally unnecessary plot.
Yeah. And like thinking about like the boys and then us, it was like I didn't have to be secretly in love with them to care about them or to help them.
Exactly.
So
that's
it's not necessary.
I think like largely our girl group didn't like interdate with the guy group. For the most part, we were all just
there's
friends.
one notable exception, but
there was like one notable exception, exactly, which I felt like statistically was gonna happen. Exactly. So but we still all cared about each other regardless. So I think I would honestly love to see more of that guy girl friendship without the romantic interest.
I would just love to see more friendships in general, because I feel like those are always overshadowed by the romantic subplots too.
It is. Yeah, it is very true. The romantic subplots do tend to overshadow friendship arcs. And that's, I think, that
disappointing.
It is. I think the friendship arcs should be more important than the romantic subplots for the most part. Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on the book, but
it really does.
Friendship can be hard too.
Right. I think, I won't touch on that yet. I could go on about that. I think, gosh, so I kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm also trying to like put words together about when it would be useful to have a romantic subplot. Like when can you determine that it is necessary versus not necessary? And I think a good rule of thumb is that if you take the love interest and they are important to the plot in some other way, then the romantic subplot can make sense because it brings conflict. It also brings, a reason for them to interact. I think if the love interest is only there as a love interest, that's a problem.
I agree.
So if they serve a separate purpose, if you could have the story feasibly without the romantic subplot and still justify that character being there, then maybe the romantic subplot is justified. But if that's the only reason they're there, that's a problem.
I agree.
Do you agree? Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Well, it's like, honestly, it's the same way that in real life, people will say something like, yeah, I just feel like he likes the idea of me more than me. Nobody wants to feel like they're wanted as an idea rather than a person. But that is exactly what an irrelevant romantic subplot is that you've put a character in here because we like the idea of a romantic interest, but they're not necessary to the story. They're not pertinent. It's just that we all like the idea of it. And I just think it just kind of feels cheap. It feels like what's the word? Gimcrack.
Yeah.
It feels Gimcrack.
It does.
Ooh,
you're
look,
so right.
Checked my box for the week. I did it.
Check.
It does. It feels
yes,
Gimcrack.
it does.
Yeah.
And it feels like something that won't last beyond the bounds of the story. You want to, if you're going to end with the love interest and the main character being together, you want to give them enough of a foundation that the reader can believe they will be together after the last chapter.
Yeah, it's true. I think Leigh Bardugo again did a good job. I'll keep reading
Percy Jackson and Leigh Bardugo every episode.
Every single episode. I guess those are like my favorite books these days. But in the Shadow and Bone series, the Alina and Mal romantic subplot, I think was done really well because he was super relevant to the plot, especially if you read to the end of the book, and I won't spoil it, but very relevant to the plot on his own. They've been friends since childhood, so we got to see, and they had a genuine friendship that even when it seemed like their romantic subplot was dying off, they still had that friendship. So the friendship came first and foremost. I think their friendship had way more to do with the plot than the romance did. And yet there was like 3 or 4 notably romantic instances between them throughout the trilogy. And again, like that's still only 3 or 4, but it was a super potent romance. And at the end, we can definitely see them, spoiler, like living out their lives together.
Right.
So yeah. So, I mean, I think that was just really well done. It was a very, very slow build. It was more about their friendship plot than their romantic plot. But because they were in love with each other, the romance came through that way. And it wasn't like, I can't wait to get to the next makeout scene,
Right.
It
was a natural part of the story where you came to it, you're like, yeah, I'm in. And then when it was action, you were like, I'm also in here.
Yes, exactly. And Alina's overall goal remained Alina's overall goal to the point where she even sacrificed her relationship multiple times.
But not for a stupid reason. For
stupid reasons. For good reasons. She sacrificed the romantic relationship because it was basically caught between a rock and a hard place. Like she could have her relationship and basically let the world go to hell, or she could pursue her purpose in the world, but she couldn't do it with Mal by her side. So at least that's how Alina felt. And it was a very valid feeling. Like there was a lot of evidence for it in her life.
Right.
So that was a really well done romantic subplot. I feel like that was the perfect level if you're not going to call your book like a YA fantasy romance, like if it's not also in the romance genre, I feel like that level of romantic subplot is a really good one.
Do you think you can evenly balance fantasy and romance, or does one always take a back seat?
I think one always takes a back seat. I would literally, as I was thinking about it, change my mind because I was going to say, yeah, you can have them equally balanced because I was thinking of Serpent and Dove, but then I was thinking, no, that book was really more about the romance than the fantasy. And I didn't mind because it was consistently from the beginning about this relationship between the two characters. And it wasn't always romantic, but it was always about the relationship between the two characters. And it was set against a fantasy backdrop. So I feel like when it's a fantasy romance, it's more like romance big plot against the backdrop of fantasy. Whereas with books that are fantasy with the romantic, undertones or the romantic subplot, it's more like Leigh Bardugo's stuff. I think pretty much all of her stuff that I've read, where there are love stories in there and there are romantic subplots, but it's never the biggest focus.
And
but
I do think that's something
smaller.
Yeah, I think that's something you have to consider. How much of a part do you want this to play?
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't call any of her books fantasy romances.
Right. And I think that plays a big part into marketing once you get to that point, because there are imprints of publishers that are specifically YA romance.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are fantasy, but their focus is romance.
Yeah.
And I tend to prefer fantasy with a subplot of romance as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
So
it depends, because if I read a fantasy romance, I want it extremely well done, highly consistent, and I have very high standards for my characters. I don't want to see them acting like fools out there. That's why I like Serpent and Dove, was like their hatred for each other was so authentic, and it was the slowest burn for an enemies to lovers. And I was like, I could see this happening. So that was like excellently done. But when a YA fantasy romance is done badly, it's so frustrating.
So one of the other books I was going to talk about is Burning by Danielle Rollins. And I liked this book. I wouldn't say I loved it. And I don't even know how many people know about this book, but it felt shoehorned in, the romance part. And I just found myself constantly waiting for it to come back to any kind of relevance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when it never did, I was really disappointed. And I think that's why I didn't like it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And it's a duology, and the second book didn't do that as much. It felt more like this was contributing to the point. So.
I think also when you write a romantic subplot, you have to remember that it is still a type of plot. So it still needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. It still needs, like rising action, climax, falling action. Like it needs all of the same elements that the big plot needs. It just needs to not overshadow the big plot at any point in time. So it's tricky. Like I think it's really tricky to write a romantic subplot that's even close in importance to the main plot without overshadowing it. Maybe not Alina and Mal, their romantic subplot was pretty subtle, I felt like, comparatively, but Nina, Zenik, and Matthias in that series, and in Six of Crows, their whole story is a love story, but they're just two of the characters, and their love story plot intertwines with the overall plot, but they kind of have their whole separate storyline going on.
Yeah.
And it all ties together beautifully, but theirs is romantic. Like if we were reading a book that was only about Nina and Matthias, that would be a fantasy romance.
Yes. I think this plays into my whole third person puppet master thing. That I really like it when you have kind of an ensemble cast and they couple up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of love that.
I love that too.
It bothers me in first person when people start to couple up. Does that make sense? Because I feel like I can never care as much about the other people that aren't the main character.
Yeah.
But do you think you should do it differently in first versus third person?
So when you say that it upsets you, do you mean it is in this scenario, is the main character also in a relationship, or is it everyone around the main character coupling up?
When the main character is also in one, because I feel like in first person, it's hard to care about the characters as much as you care about the main character, whereas in third person, you have a little more.
I think in first
it can be
person,
done well. It's just harder.
I think like most of the stuff we say, we're talking in generalities. If you can do this stuff really well, you can break all the rules you want to, but you have to be able to do it really well. And some of this stuff is just really hard. I think to answer your question, I think in first person, when couples start pairing off, I don't like it as much. It feels a little bit more Gimcrack. It does. Yeah. It just feels more Gimcrack. I'm not as about it. Kind of because, you can't know or care about the other characters as well, but it also just feels like it's doing it for the sake of having a bunch of couples. I think you can do it, but I would only suggest doing it over like a period of time from book to book. Like I wouldn't ever have
add
single
them slowly.
Characters all end up together with couples at the end of the same book,
like Shakespeare.
Yes, exactly. I wouldn't do that.
Don't pull Shakespeare.
If that's your end goal, you can get there, but I'd give it a few books to get there if that is where you want to end up. Otherwise, you could have a couple together. A good like for like background characters is like the couple that's always on and off again. because we all know a
Mm-hmm.
couple like that. So that's another good way to, like, if you want to throw some romance in, just look
Sure.
around you for a minute. Look at the relationships in your lives that you think are fun to watch, that you're secretly kind of invested in for the drama. And you can kind of replicate some of those elements because your readers will also be interested in those elements.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I don't think that like side characters having relationships in first person isn't a good thing sometimes. It's just that the love interest for the main character is always going to take priority and it's always going to feel more important. Whereas in third person, they all kind of have a certain equal weight because you're not in anyone's head directly.
It's true.
So it's easier to do that. Maybe,
that's why it feels gimcrack when it's in first person, is because to, like, any other couples besides the romantic interest of the main character, the first person main character, are gonna, you're just not gonna care as much, you know? It's
they don't hold the same weight.
They don't hold the same weight. They don't hold the same value. It's like, and the main character is never gonna feel the same way about the value of the other relationships as she is about her own or his own relationship. So yeah, that's true. If you want your readers to care also just as much about every couple, then I would say that's a third person thing to do, or to pull it off very slowly over a series of time.
Yes. Yeah, agree. Yeah, that's all I had to say about that point. Let's see, what else did I write down? I don't know. That's all I had to say.
Let me see.
What else did you have to say?
It's hard because I don't write romance.
I lied.
Oh, good.
I also, and I think this is in this category, I get really annoyed when authors put fluff into their books. Do you know what that means?
Yes.
When it's like, it's all the scenes that don't really contribute to the plot, but they're sweet and you like the characters, so you kind of put up with it.
Yeah, that is so much romantic subplot stuff.
I don't want to talk badly about anyone, but I feel like Cassandra Clare is starting to do this. How many of her series have you read? Have you read all of them?
Not a lot, so I really can't say.
So I have read The Mortal Instruments, The Infernal Devices.
I've read The Infernal Devices, and The Siren is Cassandra Clare too, isn't it?
No, that's Carrot Cast.
Oh, that's Carrot Cast. I get them mixed up because Kendall talks about both of them. Yeah. But no, I've read The Infernal Devices, and I think that's it for Cassandra Clare.
So I read the first book. What is it called? Lady Midnight of that's as far as I am. I'm behind. I think there are like 2 more series now. And it's so long. I think it's like 800 pages.
Oh my God.
And if you have a story to tell that is 800 pages, go for it.
Do it.
I'm down. But I swear 500 of these pages were just fluff.
Yeah.
And she can do it because a lot of characters from the other series were brought in. So
that's why.
Yeah. And they're, she has the freedom to do that. I feel like because she's so popular.
Yep.
And I'm sure a lot of people like it, but I just feel like it weakens the story. I feel like fluff has its place in fan fiction. I don't know why I'm talking about fan fiction a lot.
It's really on your mind.
That's where fluff scenes belong. I don't think they belong in the real book. And so the danger of romantic subplots is you really do have to be careful that it all matters. And you can have fluff scenes between friends and family members and everything too. But I just think it's really common with the romantic subplots. And that really bothers me because I'm sitting there saying, okay, is this just badly written or is this going to come up later?
Yeah,
I'm trying to process it all.
It's true. Exactly. I think that's a big risk with fluff, and I'm definitely not a fan of fluff. I agree. I think fan fiction is definitely the place for it. If you're an author who wants to write some scenes that are just sweet and cute, or you just like bonus scenes, you can write bonus scenes and or publish them as short stories, or you can even make a whole book that's specifically dedicated to bonus scenes and short stories to do with your world. I would recommend that as opposed to incorporating a bunch of fluff into what would otherwise be a really strong book on its own.
Exactly. Because 800 pages is a lot of pages to spend on a couple that isn't contributing to the plot.
I'm also a big fan of concise work. I mean, I'm not a short story person, but I do believe you can usually cut like 20 to 30% of your book, which hurts so bad because to us it's important and we can see why we put everything in there. But the fact of the matter is, like, for the most part, the more concise something is, the more impactful it is. If you can say the same thing in 10 words that you can in 30 words, the 10 word version is going to make a bigger impact. And I think the same is kind of true for stories, which is why, sure, write everything you want in the story and don't throw anything away. Copy and paste it into another document first, but then you have to cut it if it's not, I mean, in my opinion, if it's not super related to the plot, if it's not super necessary or makes a point you really want to make, I'd say cut.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, for my weekly complaint about the publishing industry, I feel like really well-established authors like Cassandra Clare, like Sarah J. Maas, they do this because they can, and because readers won't stop buying, even though it's not as good of a story as their original books were. Because I mean, people complained about it. I really liked The Mortal Instruments. I love The Infernal Devices. I just feel like Lady Midnight was really weak comparatively.
Well,
and I think it's because they don't confront that.
It's true. And you also have readers who will like that though. So the thing, I feel like you have some readers who are in it for like the way you feel in the moment reading each scene. And those are the ones who like a lot of those stories with like the romantic subplots that aren't super relevant, a lot of the fluff. And then you have people who read like you do, and like you read for craft, I feel like. So if the craft is poor, you don't enjoy it and you're taken out of it. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think I pay as close of attention to craft as you do, but at the same time, I don't like a lot of fluff. I like things to be concise. I like only the important information, but I'll do a little bit of fluff here and there. I mean, I like the Tiger's Curse series, for heaven's sake. There's quite a bit of fluff in there.
And fluff isn't fluff if it's for character development to establish the relationship. You do need some of that.
Yeah, that's true.
It's when it's overdone.
Yeah. Or even if you're writing it into your book because like you want a scene that's all about cozy comfort. And you've written this, and it is a fluff scene, and but it's given your readers a feeling of cozy comfort. You've met your goal. I mean,
that's true.
People who read for craft won't like it, but some people will love it. So, it just depends on what your goal is. Like, what kind of writer do you want to be?
Yeah. I just feel like if you have a cozy story or whatever, you can put craft into that. And
I agree.
That would make it better. All the people that are reading it like me are going to like it more. And all the people that want it for the fluff are still going to like it. So
yeah, it's true.
I feel like that's the direction you should go.
It's true. The sweet spot is to work all of it together, to disguise the fluff as craft and the craft as fluff. Like that's the sweet spot. It's just kind of hard to do. And I think we all tend to trend one way or the other as a writer. And it's probably kind of based on what we like to read. So you're pickier because you're pickier with your own writing. I mean, you've been working on the same series for a while because you're very picky about your craft.
True.
I am picky about my craft, but I like to finish things. So
you're a middle ground.
I'm a middle grounder. Yeah. And I am for most things. So I can put up with a little bit of fluff. If the ending is good, if it's still mostly concise. I say if you're going to do fluff though, do try to be concise. Try to limit the fluff.
And put something into it that is important to the plot. Just drop some kind of detail that we need to know, just to make it important.
I agree. Otherwise, then even the ones who like fluff, you risk losing them. And that's the goal is to not just make any reader disengage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I could say that about Firekeeper's Daughter. This is the first book in a while that I've been like, I don't want to put it down. And I put it down and I just all I can think about is picking it back up. And those are such good books. And it's so few and far between these days. I don't know if I've just become more cynical or my brain just got really dumb or something, but like I do not hit that much recently with books. Like I still like them, but I'm like, I'll put this down and watch some TV.
Yeah. I think part of it is that things aren't done as well as they used to be, but
see, that's how I feel too. But are we going to be those people who are like, back in my day?
I know. How old are we?
God, how old are we? Today I told my sister that age on the phone, and I was like, I'm going to be this age next year, and then I was like, hang on, is that true? And I had to like count it out, and I was like, oh my God, it is.
It feels old because it's the oldest I've ever been, but it is not old.
No, exactly. It's not. So that is what I think I said this last episode too, but that is what blows my mind, that kids on TikTok are saying stuff that you and I do is old. I'm like, we are still young objectively. So that is just wild.
It is
weird. I
weird.
don't remember saying stuff like that about people our age when I was that young.
I know. I remember thinking, like 40 or 50 is old.
Yeah.
But now it's like 20 years old is too old. I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's so weird. I always thought like when you're in your 60s, you're older. And then when you're in your 80s, you're elderly. And like, that's always for me been like the thing, and like when you hit your late 40s, well, mid 40s to like early 50s is when people sometimes start to get kind of out of touch with things like, the young people do. But like, that's That's what I've always thought, and it hasn't changed. But I don't know. So I don't know, has culture just changed? Are we old for this like new rising culture? If so, I don't like that. They're gonna think I'm elderly when I turn like 30.
Like, I'm still young, dang it.
I'm still young.
I can run a mile.
They're like, look at grandma, she's so cute.
Oh gosh.
God.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to just sit and complain. I kind of do want to just sit and complain, but I don't want to because I don't want people to. I know. I don't want to sound elitist, but I'm kind of a purist when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I just feel like there's so many books being published. If we, and it's so hard to figure out what to read, we just like cull the field a little bit based on quality, we would still have really good stories, but we wouldn't be disappointed in that type of thing. So
it's true. I think the problem is a lot of the problem is with the publishing industry there, because there are well-crafted books. Like there's so many books being queried every day. Like, you know that there are well-crafted books that are out there, but I don't think the publishing industry trusts readers to pick out well-crafted things. I think that they think readers are dumb, which drives me crazy. Like I say that to authors, don't treat your readers like they're dumb. And absolutely the publishing industry, don't treat readers like they're dumb. Like, I feel like the publishing industry tends to just pick books based on, do they have the kind of fluff people are looking for, and or do they have those key words that people are looking for?
The pitch. Do they have the pitch we can sell?
Do they have the pitch we can sell? Exactly. And sometimes it's like a cute, fluffy, like enemies to lovers, even if it's totally undeveloped, Court of Thorns and Roses style romance that they think will, catch people's eye. And sometimes it's stuff like, and this one really upsets me, is like virtue signaling words,
I know.
like a LGBTQ plus minority author, blah, blah, blah.
It's like, what do you mean by that?
What do you mean? Exactly. All of those things are great, but I feel like there are actual minority authors and LGBTQ authors that are writing amazing things.
But they're not the ones that get published.
They're not the ones getting published. Like the ones that are getting published are just like basically the first one that hit the agent's desk that had a pitch they could sell and that had one of those virtue signaling words in there. So then the important messages people actually need and want to hear aren't going to get bought, because the publishing industry thinks, you know what, all of these woke readers are just going to pick up this book because it's got that keyword in it. Like we know they will. And I don't think it goes that well. I think that's why people go through the book industry is like ever changing. There's not a ton of like really big trends people are into, because we're just going through all this gimcrack. I'll use it again.
Do it.
Wow, this is my new favorite word, everybody.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I wish the publishing industry would put a little bit more stock in reader intelligence. Yeah.
And I, as someone who wants to be published, I don't want to say that we need to limit it more, because that will affect me.
I know.
But, and not to sound, like I'm all that or anything, but I feel like I have put a lot of time and effort into it. And so there are certain, I don't know that I would describe it as trendy, but certain trends that I almost missed because I put time and effort into it. And all the people that got there first are the ones that didn't. And so I feel it's got to be happening to other people.
When I see, because there have been a couple times I've been like, oh, this looks like an interesting pitch, pick up the book because of the back cover, and then I read it and it is objectively just a badly written book, and I'm sitting here like, how is it possible? Like, I don't think I'm like the most amazing author ever, but I know I'm better than this much.
Right. So, and then you get depressed. You're like, why can't I get a book deal?
Yeah, exactly. Because what it's about is whoever gets to the agent first. And that's really, I feel like all it is when it comes to trends is they got to the agent first. And like when the agent was looking for that trend specifically, had room on their list, and also had already had their cup of coffee for the day. Like, it's just so subjective. And I think, like you said, it has way more to do with who gets there first than who did it best, which is really frustrating.
Yeah. I'm not sure if publishers, do they have quotas? Do they try to publish a certain number every year? Because if they do, they shouldn't do that. They should publish the good books that come across their desk.
I agree. I don't know. I don't know if they do or not. Interesting.
Maybe I should look into that, because I've been querying lately. Not to jump ahead or anything. We can still talk about romantic subplots, but I've been.
No, you're good. I don't think I have anything else to say about
it. So now it's just a rant about the publishing industry. Cool.
Excellent. You're like, I've been waiting for this my whole life.
I sent out like 15 queries over the past couple days, and I feel really good about it.
Nice.
I felt good about it in the past, but I feel particularly good about it. And I've just been noticing that a lot of them say that they want books with good pitches.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Because I
Mhm.
can't sum up my book in one sentence. I've actually kind of come up with a decent pitch that kind of gets
Yeah.
across the main plot, but it doesn't
Yeah.
get across all the details. And I'm like, how does one sum
It
up
is
a good book in one line?
hard. Honestly, you have to learn to pitch your book for the reaction that you get. Even if
Yeah.
it's not like the most accurate depiction of your book. Like if you want someone to give your book a chance, instead, it doesn't matter how good you are at your craft. You have to learn a totally different skill. And I hate to say it, but it's kind of like how to bullshit really well. Because you know you have a good book, but you
Right.
have to be able to convince the literary agent or their intern or whatever that you have a good book and that you have a pitch that you think other people will look at and say, hey, that's a good book. So you have to do like I hate to say like clickbaity, but there is like, it's a bit like you want a little bit of clickbaity power in your pitch.
It's true.
And it honestly doesn't matter how close it is to the plot because it's so short. You can get away with being vague in some ways, you know, and specific in others. I think there's an art to pitching your book, to writing a query. I think it does get easier with practice.
Yeah, I've definitely
with
noticed
years of practice. Yeah.
And I just think it's frustrating because I will, as a reader, I pick up a book, I read the, jacket or whatever, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds good. And I start reading it, and it'll just be totally different in vibe than what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And I try really hard not to do that when I'm querying, but part of me feels like, well,
maybe
everyone else does it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I hate to say that, but it is kind of true. Like you kind of have to play the game in front of you. I mean, it's a bummer. You shouldn't have to play a game to get somebody to consider your work for the value of the work itself, but you kind of have to because you're competing against people who are playing dirty. And you're playing the game for judges who don't care if you play dirty. So the only rules you're breaking are your own, really. And I mean,
it's hard to have standards.
Yeah, it's hard to have standards, and like definitely don't definitely don't lie about your book. That's annoying as hell. But
yeah, definitely don't do that.
Yeah, definitely don't lie because then everyone's going to be mad at you. But yeah, I mean,
but you focus in on details that really aren't even the main thing. Like this will happen a lot. I will pick up a book and they will focus in on either the romantic subplot or the action plot. And then the book is totally focused in the other direction.
Yeah.
And I think, why are you doing this?
You don't want your pitch to include something that's not in your book. But I think it's okay for the sake of getting somebody to actually look at your book to touch in your pitch on the things that people like to see, even if that's not the main point. I think literary agents just want to know that you have those elements in there that they're looking for. Yeah. I don't think you should write to trends, but I think if you're like, hey, I have this great book and it has this, this market potential, or it has these specific things this agent said that they're looking for, hit those things, make it sound like it's all about those things. They're going to read the book before they publish it, but the goal is to get them to look at the book without lying. So don't lie, but yeah. And it's hard.
Just misdirect.
Yeah, well, it kind of is. It's like smoke and mirrors. Like you don't want to be deceptive, but you do want to highlight that your book has what they're looking for. So your pitch really has to do that. And when they market your book, that's what they're going to do too, is they're going to highlight the elements of your book that they think readers want to see, even if that's not what the book is actually about. Like if that's not the main idea. You know the main idea of your book, all the elements, and which ones are the most important. But it's also that thing where different parts are going to be more or less important to different people. So different parts are going to be more important for literary agents to see. Different parts are going to be more important to your readers. So I think some of that is kind of like letting go of what you know about your book and trying to look at it from, if my life were on the line and I had to sell this book to somebody, I had to get somebody to buy this book. And I know XYZ about my audience. What can I say to get them to just look at this book? I think a good way to do it is to see where you get reactions, which is where, pitching to people in your life that pitching verbally is so much worse than in writing. It is so hard. But I've noticed the more that I make myself pitch my books verbally to people that I know, to readers, the better my query letters get, because when you're speaking to somebody and you see how they react to the different words you say or the different things you tell them about the book, you immediately have that gratification of, oh, that's what they're responding to. So maybe it's not the part of the book I thought was really that interesting, but okay, now I've just told this to an avid reader, and now I know this is the part that they find like really interesting, and that's what they're into. So when you go to write your query letter, maybe that's the part that I need to highlight more. So I think that's where practicing verbal pitches is good, because it's just a compass to tell you what are the parts of the story that I need to pitch.
Am I generally going north?
Am I generally going north with this? Exactly.
Like, for example, something that I did, so you always want to look at what the literary agents say specifically that they want.
Yes.
And I will tailor the query letter to that. So if they're like, I want character driven stories, I'm like, well, this is not character driven, but let me focus on the relationships in the query letter instead of the plot.
Exactly. You don't lie, but you definitely always
shift the focus.
That's exactly what it is you just shift the focus depending on who you're querying. When you get a really good pitch down, I think it's hard to do, but I think there's certain elements of a pitch that should be there every time, no matter who you're querying. Right. Yeah, like you said, like if someone who's looking for character driven, focus on the relationships and the characters. If it's somebody who's looking for, books that have minority or LGBTQ representation, and you already authentically have that in your book, because let them know. Just let them know that it's in there somehow, because that's what they're looking for. That's what their bosses have told them they need to publish. That is what people want to read about, which is good. But and this could be a totally different episode. Do not put that stuff in the book if it doesn't belong in the book authentically, because it is offensive. It's cheap. It cheapens the matter itself. It's craft wise, it does. It always looks badly written. And then it's also taking something away from the authors who have already written stories that are authentically good and come from an authentic place. Don't muddy your story with that and take it from them. Just keep your story. You have your story, and your story's message, even if you think it's not the message that's all over the media at the moment. Your message is still important, and their message is still important. You can't tell everybody's message, and acting like you can is, oh my gosh, yes, it's doing yourself a disservice. It's doing the other authors who have great stories a disservice. So don't do it.
Have faith in your own story. Don't steal someone else's.
Exactly. Have faith in your own story. If you think that a literary agent is looking for something that shows diversity, and maybe you don't have a traditional representation of diversity in your book, but you do think that your book touches on diversity in an authentic way, you can possibly highlight that in your query letter. But don't lie about it, and don't change your book to suit a literary agent's taste either.
Yeah, agree. And so just to bring this full circle, if you're going to put a romantic subplot in there, don't make it too big because you feel like you need that to pitch it. You can just pitch it as a bigger part of the book than it is.
That's exactly true. If you see someone who's looking for YA fantasy romance and you're like, well, I have a YA fantasy with a romantic subplot, just bring that up in your pitch. Just make sure that your query letter is only 1 page long, and your pitch in person should be about 30 seconds. So, I mean, the fact that you mention the characters and their romantic, attachment to each other or whatever, you're good to go. It's in there. They've seen that it's in there. That's when you just start to tailor how you deliver the information, which is when it's fun to test people.
Right. Don't tailor the book, but tailor the query letter.
Yes. Don't tailor your advice. Book. I agree. Don't change your message. Change your pitch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like that's not exactly on the romantic subplot thing we started with, but
I tried to bring it back around.
You did. You brought it back around well. I think I just didn't have a ton to say about romantic subplot. Don't do it badly. It's like general everything. Idea. Yeah. It's like everything in a book. Don't include it for the sake of including it. Don't include virtue signaling for the sake of looking like a virtuous writer. Don't include a romantic subplot because you think that for the genre you're supposed to have one.
Right. Let it happen naturally.
Don't ever force something into your book that doesn't need to be in there. It will show that it is forced, and your message is just as important as anyone else's message, and it's going to come through, and that's okay. There's no reason you need to feel like your message or your book's not good enough without forcing something that doesn't belong into it. Yes. So yeah.
Let's see, do I have any last minute thoughts on the romantic subplot? I think my major thing is just books can be interesting without them. I think a lot of us like to read them, but every once in a while when I'm, I've read 10 books with romantic subplots, I like one without it.
Yeah, it's true.
It's okay to not have it. And I feel like especially male writers don't include them as much. Or like to read them, and that's totally fine. And you also need to be aware, like if you're a woman writing for YA fantasy, if you do include too much romance, you might be alienating male readers, and maybe you don't care, but maybe you do.
That's true.
So
I think if your goal is to be really big across the board, like get like one of like the really biggest name series, I don't think romance should be your primary goal, because it does tend to be female focused, which is fine. I mean, maybe you've nailed it and you've found the way to represent romance that both sides love it just as much as the other. But because that's harder, I say make it a subplot well done, or don't include it. That's fine. I mean,
okay, this just occurred to me. Do you think that men are less likely or less inclined to like romantic subplots because they like the more realistic stuff? Because a lot of romantic subplots are kind of unrealistic in a sense, and women are, they like the fantasy of it, and men are the more realistic side. Do you think that makes sense or no?
No. And here's why is I think I've seen men that I respect and I think are intelligent people look at a woman with full makeup and little like booty outfit costume looking hot as hell and say, I like that she looks so natural. She's not wearing any makeup. Okay, and I'm like, fair. Interesting how none of that is true. And then I even asked my husband once, because we came across one of these like videos of this girl dancing on TikTok, and it wasn't like anything like, skanky or weird. It was just like, also not trying to slut shame if that's how that came across. But she was wearing like this like little like anime outfit, and it was super cute, and her hair and makeup was done super cute. And I was just like feeling bad about myself at the time. So I'm watching it, I was like thinking, God, that must have taken so long. Like, I'm just thinking about how exhausting it is. Because like, not only does it take a long time to do your hair and your makeup and your costume like that, I mean, literally hours, but then you have to do the same if she was doing a dance to a song. So I'm like, you have to do the same take over and over and over to get it perfect. And I told Javi all of that, and he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, and like, he seemed to like
his first try.
That like, it's just, no, she probably just threw that stuff on in first try. And I'm like, no. So no, I don't particularly think that men are more realistic.
So that makes sense, because men are obviously involved in romance in real life. So why don't they like those subplots as much?
I think it's a cycle. I think because male writers don't write them. Male writers don't write them. I think that like it's just not a thing like male authors are expected to do. Like we just said, like I would say the majority of romantic subplots are there because we feel that they're supposed to be there. And as females, we're reading books about women, and most books about women have romantic subplots. So then we as women go write a book and we put in a romantic subplot. Guys that are reading books that aren't about women are probably not seeing the romantic subplots because guys just don't write them as much. I think it's just like a cultural difference thing between men and women. Not that they're not there, but they very rarely overshadow, the main plot in guy authored stuff. So I think it's just like a cycle thing. Like,
I've just always wondered that, because I can read books without the romantic subplot, and I can read books by male authors and with male main characters, and I like them just as much. But there is this, I think there's studies that have been done that say that especially teenage boys don't read books by women as much. They like to read from male authors, and I don't read books
by men as much. I've never have. Really? I still don't. There are some. I started reading Dean Koontz, pretty good. Obviously I love Percy Jackson, which is by Rick Riordan, but for the most part I only pick up books by female authors, and it's not intentional. It's just that's what I gravitate towards, and I think probably that's true for dudes too. So there are exceptions to it, and it really doesn't matter what you read. But I think because we do tend to gravitate one way or the other, that's probably why female written books have romantic subplots and male written books tend to not have them, or to not have them be as much of a focal point. And
it just creates a monster where it's a cycle. Over and
it's
over.
True. I mean, there's also that thing where like, I mean, this is like a highly debated thing, but people act like relationships are more important to women, and I don't think that
can't be true.
No, I don't think
because
it is
men
true.
are involved too.
It's true. That's true. But I think women do have this more like interpersonal awareness in a way. I don't want to say this wrong and offend people, because I'm not trying to. I think the female approach to relationships and the typically male approach to relationships are very different approaches. And I think what women are aware of in a relationship tends to be pretty different than what men are aware of in the same relationship. Javi and I are very similar people but very similar. But it's weird, like just the things about him that are stereotypically dude and the things that are stereotypically girl about me make us interpret things and focus on things that are like totally different in the relationship. Things like Javi feels like he thinks quality time for us to him is like we're sitting in the same room, he has his headphones on, he's gaming, I'm on my computer working like in the room, but it's dark and I'm on the couch behind him because he's gaming on his PC. Not talking, not interacting at all, and he's still like, quality time.
We spent like 4 hours together yesterday.
Yeah, he's like,
no, we didn't.
Exactly. He thinks about how much time we spent in the same room. I think about how much time we spent interacting.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's not just like a guy girl thing. That's also just like a person thing. But I do think that maybe that's why women tend to gravitate towards the romantic subplots written by women too, is because we all notice the same things and kind of look for the same things. And a lot of us are more like drawn to start a family. And, it's always been that way generationally. There's no right or wrong about it. You want what you want. Right. But traditionally that is how it's been. And for a lot of us, it still is. And I don't think there's any shame in wanting romance and wanting a family and being a relationally focused person. My mother is very relationally focused in every way, not just like romantically, but just like she needs people in her life to care about and to love. And that like deep, loving, caring attachment between other people is extremely important to her. So that's why she watches a lot of like Hallmarky movies where it's not, yes, we're all there for the big, romantic plot that's totally cheesy, but they have like supportive family members and friends, and it's cozy, it's warm, it's relationships. So I think because traditionally and still, and there's nothing wrong with it, a lot of women want a relationship because they want a family and all the good things that come with it. We see little hints of it in that book more, whereas I think it's just like not as much in the forefront of men's minds.
I wonder too if it has something to do with the whole women are spaghetti, men are waffles.
Probably.
That when women write books, it's all the details just converge.
Yeah, that's
when
men
write it. They can compartmentalize that. Yes. This is not a romance book, so I will not put romance in
That's what I'm thinking, because I think men want relationships just as much as women do, but I think they think about them like not at the same time as other things, like there's my career box, there's my romantic relationship box, there's my family relationship, my friendships, and they're all kind of different for dudes. So I think that if we see romance in a male written book, it tends to be more segmented from the rest of the book, whereas like you said, in female written books, it's that everything's intertwined for us. So of course the romantic subplot is there and should be intertwined, or that's how we feel like it should be, because in our lives it is. But I think that's probably it, because I hope I didn't come across. I keep doubting myself for how I don't think you came lately, across weird. I mean, I get it. I was not.
Maybe it's because I know you, but
good. See, she's not an asshole. I was not trying to say that men don't want relationships just as much as women do. I think we both want them. I just think, I think the approach to them is totally different. I think our expectations for them also tend to be different, and I think what we value about relationships tends to be different.
So kind of on that line. So last episode, the word of the week was Jauska, remember? So that's like the conversations you play out in your head. Yeah. And so I told my parents about this, and my mom was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I didn't know there was a word for that, whatever. And my dad said, what do you mean? What is that? I was like, it's when you play a conversation through your head. He's like, why would you do that?
It doesn't do that?
I'm like, I know. I'm like, I'm sorry, you've never done that before? That's 90% of my life.
I don't understand. Is that... Now I want to ask Javi.
I know. And so then he was talking, and I could tell he doesn't understand the concept, because he would say like, so he asked me questions. He's like, well, you've had conversations in your head about this. I'm like, no, that's not what I mean at all. So it was really interesting. You should ask Javi. I wonder if that's a male female difference.
I thought everybody did that. I'll ask him. I'll write it down. I'll let you guys know next episode. And you guys let us know. What do you think? Ask the person of the opposite gender in your family if they have Jauskas in their head, or if this is what tends to be a female thing. I'm so curious to know. Weird.
So I guess that just always interests me with like in books, how male and female authors focus on different things. I just think it's interesting.
It is interesting. It is interesting. Oh, I have a red pen point. I forgot to say at the beginning of the episode.
I did too. I was just about to say that. You go first.
Oh my God, we're so insane. So my RPP is last episode, or maybe it's the episode before, we were talking about the case with where Brian Laundrie is still missing and Gabby Petito is unfortunately so I said that my sister had told me that Brian Laundrie had been obsessed with this book called Lullaby, and that is true. I mean, I've looked it up and I've seen it. Apparently he was really into this book called Lullaby. And I had said it was about a serial killer couple who goes around the country killing people. The book is actually about a guy who loses his wife and then he goes and kills people around the country. So it's not a couple that goes killing people. It was a serial killer whose wife died and then he went and killed people on the road, like road trip in a van or something. So anyways, that's my red pen point. I gave the wrong impression of that book, but that's apparently what that book is, and that's all I know. And unfortunately no updates on that case, but
okay, so my red pen point is it's just a small thing that in the dialogue episode I said, so there's quotation dialogue where you put it literally in quotations. And then I said there's other dialogue where it's out of quotations, and I couldn't remember what it's called. It's called indirect dialogue. So instead of saying, quotation, what did you say? And quotation, she said, then you would say she asked, something like that.
Yeah.
So indirect, that's called. So direct and indirect dialogue.
Yay. Good wrap-up.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. I don't have any other wrap-ups. How's your writing going this week? Did we already talk about that?
A little bit, mostly querying. I'm trying to think about what I'm going to do for NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo is hard for me because I have books already written that I have to work on.
What if you do something totally different?
I know, I thought about it. I'm just unsure. I have a lot of ideas because they're backlogged from my whole life. I know. So maybe I'll send you a few of my ideas and you can
oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to do NaNoWriMo too. I haven't done it in a while because it is hard to do. For those of you guys who don't know, it's National Novel Writing Month, November. So you write a book in a month. And depending on your genre or whatever, people have different word count goals. Mine is usually 75,000 because that's like the lower average for a YA book, which tends to be my genre. And honestly, if you get the majority of a book written like in NaNoWriMo,
it's so impressive.
It's impressive, really. Yeah. So,
I've only won once. I've done it once.
Yes.
It was with book 4 of the series. Nice. So
I did it in college while going to work and class. Because I miscalculated how many words I was supposed to write a day because I'm very bad at math. And so I wrote the whole thing in like 9 days because that's how bad I am at math. And I wrote
you wrote too much each day?
I wrote too much each day because my math was that bad. And every day I was like, this seems like a lot of words to write in one day to stay on my word count goal. Yep. Interesting times. But yeah, so I think I'm going to be more careful about my calculations.
Good call.
I honestly might just like try and do like a chapter a day or something, or like most of a chapter a day. But I think I am going to do NaNoWriMo this year. So you guys should join us. You guys should check out our Patreon writers group, the Scripturient Society, and let us know if you're going to do NaNoWriMo. You can tell us a little bit about your idea if you want to. You don't have to, but tell us like what your word count goal is. Do you like NaNoWriMo? Are you terrified of NaNoWriMo? We're all going to be in this together. We can all encourage each other to stick with NaNoWriMo, and we can all help Ash double check her math.
Because all those writers are so good at math.
Dang it. Does anyone know anyone who's good at math?
Does anyone have a husband who's good at math? Is Javi good at math?
Well, he is, but it'd be so humiliating to ask
or
him.
A wife.
Or a wife who's good at math. Anyone?
It's like, oh yeah, men might listen to this.
That's true.
Other women, I don't know.
I feel like we probably have more potential for male listeners at the Scripturient Society than at that pretentious book club. I feel like.
I think so. I think writing is you have your style, but I think it's gender neutral.
I agree. That's what I was gonna say. Writing is totally gender neutral. I think reading is also gender neutral, but only for the most part, girls are the ones that talk about it, like on social media and stuff. So I certainly hope we have dudes who join the club, but it's mostly women.
Do any of you have any wives that are good at math?
Hey, yeah. Do you guys have any wives that are good at math? We could use some math friends.
Yeah, Ash needs them.
I do, honestly. Well, that's why I was like, maybe I'll just do a chapter a day and not count my words because I can't.
I have 3 family members who are accountants. You would think they would be good at math.
No,
so maybe
that's so funny. No, my husband is very good at math. But I could ask him, but then he'll probably be like, wait, you can't do this? Then I'm gonna be like, yes I can. I'm not ever asking you for anything again. Can totally do this. I passed math in college. It was for the art majors, but who cares?
It was still math class.
That's right. I still had to add and subtract things and stuff. Yennefer, say hello to Karissa.
Hi, Yennefer. Do you remember me?
Do you remember? She's like, what are you doing? She just hit me in the face with her little elbow.
I think animals and babies are very confused about people on screens.
I think so too. I don't think they get it. Hi. What up, Yen? Well, anyways, those are all the updates I've got this week.
Yep. I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, cool. Well, should we sign off?
Sure. All right. What is it?
Until next week, everybody.
Yes. Until next week. Keep writing, and we'll see you
on the next
page. Did I steal your thunder there?
No.
I don't know.
No, we got this. We got this. Okay.